Hi, everybody. I'm Varun Menon. You're listening to The Divided Line on WQHS, the student radio of the University of Pennsylvania. It is now my pleasure to introduce three-star retired Admiral Joe Sestak, former congressman and current candidate for the United States Senate from Pennsylvania. Admiral, how are you doing?
Varun, it's great to be on with you, and thank you for the compliment.
Well, sir, it's a privilege to have you on air and to be able to talk to you about some of the important issues of the campaign. As you know, our university is very politically engaged, and we want to hear a lot more about the Senate campaign and some of the things that you want to bring to Pennsylvania. James, do you want to start off with some of the questions that we got from our listeners?
Right. So Admiral, some of our students, specifically a student named Sarah Simon, was looking over your plan about higher education, and we think it's an exciting opportunity for what you said you're dedicated to bringing for Pennsylvania. Of course, as college students, we want to know what are your plans to increase opportunities for college students in Pennsylvania?
Yes, and you mean in affording education or for job opportunities?
Yeah, for affording education. That's a big point that students here at Penn are interested in.
Absolutely. As you probably know, I taught at Penn State. After I didn't win, I didn't want to lobby. I mean, I got all those lucrative lobbying offers, but I told my wife I thought it was best if I went back and teach to learn.
Absolutely.
And she put her hand on my shoulder and chuckled and said, "Are you sure, Joe? Because those were some lucrative job offers." But one of the places I taught was Penn State. And one of the students I was teaching, a wonderful student, helped me work through this issue. The Penn State. And let me tell you one example. Stafford loan. So many get them. And yet the U.S. government is going to make $127 billion on the back of our youth and their families because the interest rates are too high. Because they base them, the Stafford loans, on the 10-year Treasury security rate. Well, that was okay 15 years ago, when most students could pay off their loans by about 7 years. But today, because the burden on students, the average one graduates $30,000 in debt, they don't pay them off until about 15 years. That's the first cohort. The second cohort doesn't pay it off until about 25 years. So if we based it on the 10-year and the 30-year Treasury securities, the government returns $123.7 billion to students. They no longer pay. The interest rate is cut in half, and you begin to get a more affordable entree to college. Second, it's also it's a supply and demand problem. You know, what I think we should do is say to colleges, look, why is your inflation rate the highest of any commodity in America, higher than food, higher than housing? Tell you what, let's do what we did for Title IX, where we said, you get federal money, high schools. And if you want federal money, you have to have equal sports for women and for men. 15 years or so later, we dominated the Atlanta Olympics as women swept them because they were given a fair opportunity. That's what I think we should do with colleges. Say, look, your interest rate has to be at or below the average inflation rate here in America. And if not, you can't be getting federal money because you're not making the supply be less affordable. So it's a supply and demand thing. And those are just two of the ways that I thought I'd bring up to you in order to let you know that this is a manageable problem. We just have to look at the facts and come up with the right answers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Admiral.
Admiral, it's one thing that we
have. Call me Joe, please.
Joe, it's one of the things that we were discussing before you came on air. We were discussing your career in the Navy, and it's something that I have great respect for. As someone who's actually interested in entering the Army as a doctor, I value your service very much, and I want to thank you for it and for everything that you have done for our country over the last 30 years. I want to know what you think that your background in the Navy is going to help you with regards to many of the foreign policy-making powers going into the United States Senate, some of the unique treaty-making and war-making powers that the Senate is in charge to oversee. as you know, we had your opponent, one of your opponents, John Fetterman, on the program, and he spoke more about the importance of domestic issues. But from what we've seen from your campaign, foreign policy is an incredibly important part of the message that you're trying to sell.
Well, thank you. As you probably know, I got out of the Navy in order to run in 2006 for universal health care because my daughter had a brain cancer that only 8% of kids have lived through. She was 4 years old, and I wanted to pay back my country by everybody having the Affordable Care Act. Now, it wasn't called that in 2006, but that's why I ran. National security begins at home, I told everyone, in health, in education, and economic security. So I first and foremost want to work on restoring the American dream. But second, you're right, it's an increasingly dangerous world out there. I walked on the ground in Afghanistan as head of the Navy's anti-terrorism unit for a short mission. I commanded a carrier battle group in a war. But when I took that carrier battle group that was striking Afghanistan into Persian Gulf, as we were going to commence the precursor combat operation, the commander in the fleet out there said, "Joe, what do you think?" I said, "Sir, we're ready to go." He said, No. I mean, what do you think about what we're about to do to strike Iraq?" I said, "This is a tragedy. What's the clear and present danger to America?" And so when you see today that we just sent 200 commandos back into Iraq, I think people have to keep in mind that the military can stop a problem. We don't fix a problem. Does anybody think we fixed Iraq? So when you use our military, you should use it wisely and cautiously when we must. Look, if we had fixed the illiteracy rate of women in Afghanistan, after we stopped the Taliban and Al-Qaeda there, if we had fixed the illiteracy rate of women and given them microloans and opportunities to have a livelihood, we would have done more to fix in the long term, securing the peace, not just winning the war, so we don't have to go back in and what our military can do. Because that is what I want to bring to the United States Senate. Look at the Iranian Accord. Man, I operated with the Iranians in that Persian Gulf. It's tough waters there. And to think that Iran was going to have 4 to 5 nuclear bombs within 30 days last fall, and now all that material has been removed. They destroyed the plutonium reactor. It would take them a minimum of a year to get back to where they were last fall. And I got to tell you, if people think we just want to play whack-a-mole with our military, understand our Navy cannot survive in the Persian Gulf because we cannot find their 19 midget submarines. Our sonar doesn't work there. Now, we'll come out of the Gulf and we can destroy those nuclear facilities if they go after it again. But again, for most 4 years till they're back up and working. Military stop a problem. We don't fix them. So I want to bring a wiser voice to the United States Senate, where too many Democrats, as well as Republicans, all of them, voted for that tragic war in Iraq. I want to say, wait a moment. That diplomacy with Iran has secured America's and Israel's security more than striking them would have. That's the kind of approach I want to bring.
Admiral, I have a follow-up question to that. Many people have been very critical of the Congress for not debating the authorization for the use of military force, any sort of military force, in ISIL, not bringing it to deliberation for the Congress to debate and to consider and to decide what limitations and constraints should be put on executive authority in the region. Do you think that that's something that the Senate should debate and something that you would be interested in discussing if you were elected to the Senate?
Absolutely. Look, I'm tired of senators and congressmen, or senators like Pat Toomey and others who say, well, you know, we're not doing it right out there. Well, why don't you step up to the plate? As the Constitution provides for and has more war-making authority than the president does, why doesn't you in the Senate down there in the Congress step up and vote for authorization? Or do something instead of just debating amongst yourself. Now, I've worked for President Clinton as Director of Defense Policy. I think the president does have authority to do things. But I also believe Congress has a role to play in that, and they have absconded from that responsibility. By the way, when I'm on this discussion, may I also compliment you for deciding you want to join the service and become a doctor, because it also brings back something else. about it. People want to serve. I can remember a young woman, we kept our office open 7 days a week. She was an immigrant. She was getting denied financial aid because the visa was it. And all of a sudden we got it fixed for her. She now went to the University of Chicago. She's becoming an Army doctor. I bring that up because I'm a big believer in youth. 5,000 sailors on an aircraft carrier. Their average age is 19 and a half. They run a nuclear reactor. They fix the pilot's plane before he or she gets in and takes off. So when I come home from those wars, I want to make sure people don't forget our veterans. Don't forget you once you serve and you come home, because too many of them have actually not been taken care of. Senator Toomey, for example, voted against the jobs bill and the mental health benefits bill for our veterans. We've got to take care of our vets. That's part of war.
Admiral, that is, those are your campaign has put out some, as we discussed in the education question with James. Your campaign has put out some incredibly sophisticated, I would say, policy platforms and things that you want to accomplish and legislation you want to introduce when you're in the Senate. And this, of course, stems from both your background in the Navy and some of the stories that you've been telling us and your concern for veterans and for healthcare, but then also your time in the House, where you learned how to craft legislation and gain more of a policy outlook on some of these questions from the federal level. What I want to know, and what we had asked your opponent, was with regards to John Fetterman, was with regards to bipartisanship and the ability to get things done in the Senate, because as you know, one of the major problems in Washington, D.C. is the inability to communicate. And although you may have differences with your Republican colleagues, how would you be able to advance some of these ideas that you have and make them the law of the land in a scenario both in which either the Republicans have a majority or the Democrats have a majority but don't have the 60-vote threshold that you would need to get things passed so easily?
That is the question. I don't just want to win. I want to help govern, to help America move forward out of the quagmire we've sunk ourselves in the deep freeze in the Senate. Therefore, the track record of mine is what I want to bring to the Senate, not just from the Navy, to where you've learned to work together. But I represented a Republican district, 56% Republican, 33% Democrat. I was the second Democratic congressman since the Civil War. And yet, when I ran my second race, because we kept the office open 7 days a week to 9 o'clock every night, we rotated 50 college interns underneath my staff, where they were basically staff members from Villanova, from University of Penn, and all those other places. We actually handled 18,000 U.S. citizens and constituents who came in with a problem, 4 times the average congressional office. And when I ran the second time, because we dealt equally with Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, I was reelected by 20 points. I'd raised $3.5 million to win. I only spent $28,000 on yard signs because people came to know I was for people. It was people above party. And second, when I went to Congress those first 2 years, I passed 20 pieces of legislation, bipartisan, because I didn't put down the Republicans of the party. I may disagree with some of the leaders and their ideas, but I learned to work together. So I moved the first money in 12 years into autism, because 1 out of every 43, which just came out last week from Autism Speaks, last year it was 1 out of 75, children born in Center County, as well as all of Pennsylvania, will have autism, and I moved money into it to begin to do the research, the care for them. Second, the Elder Abuse Act, where I had to sue Wachovia Bank that knew that telemarketers were ripping off seniors who had deposits with them, and they did nothing. We forced them to give back $23 million, and I passed the first Elder Abuse Act in 17 years. And then I did that in many areas of education, so we could have people go and become occupational and physical therapists and audiologists, speech therapists to help with traumatic brain injuries of our vets coming home. No, I learned to work with others down there. It was called the most productive congressman in my first 2 years down there of my class. That's how I'm going to do it. I don't do it by beating up on others. I work with others and have a principle compromise without compromising your principles. And last, I will get out there and speak loudly about what I believe is the proper character of America, rugged individualism. But you're not on your own, because the other great characteristic is we're all in this together. We work together, and that's how I will articulate the policies to bring us, I think, another step towards helping us restore the dream by restoring the trust in leadership. And the track record of winning in that Republican district by keeping the office open and by going down to Congress and working with Republican congressmen to be the most productive congressmen is how I'll do it in the Senate.
Admiral, one question that we have asked your opponent, Mayor Fetterman, and we plan on asking your opponent, Katie McGinty, is what you believe is the special quality that you would bring as the Democratic nominee to the Senate. Essentially, why you believe that you are the best suited of the three main candidates in this race to be the nominee to defeat who we presume would be Pat Toomey in the general election.
Well, everybody has good qualities in the race, but for me, it's a life of service. I left high school and went off to the military in the Vietnam War. My best friend was a conscientious objector, but I wanted to serve. I went off, and I loved the Navy. But after 31 years, when my daughter got brain cancer, I needed to get out and take care of her. And then to thank this nation for giving her to me with the best health care plan that I could possibly have in the military, that the PAC has provided, I then went to serve again as a congressman. I went to serve so that everyone would have an opportunity to have the health care I did. I loved those town halls with the Tea Parties coming in and yelling and screaming. But you know what? I shook their hands before they came in, and after the last of 10 town halls, they asked for a picture with me. They may not have voted with me, but I sure as hell knew that I respect them as Americans. And then, when I lost narrowly, outfunded 3-1, the largest funding gap that year of any senator governor's race except Jerry Brown in California, and yet we came within 2 when our gubernatorial candidate lost by 9.5. Well, I then turned down the lobbying jobs and went to teach with our youth. And then when I was asked to run for governor, and I said, no, I don't run for just the next open job. I think I should work where I can best help restore the dream. And that's when I went to run for Senate. So to me, it's bringing service, because you can't do better for yourself than by serving others above yourself. It's what I learned over those years. Those 18,000 people walked in my office, 1,000 with housing and home foreclosure problems in that recession. We saved, there's 650 of them. You can be wealthy other than by money. I want to bring that type of service to others. And that's why I walked in the shoes of Pennsylvanians when I walked 422 miles across the state to show them that I would always remember to walk in their shoes and hold me accountable, not for what I say, but for the deeds and the results to help restore the American dream.
Well, James actually really spoke about your walk across the state. He was telling us about some of the things that happened along that walk in our preview to this interview. And actually, in fact, I'm going to turn it over to James so that he can hit some of our listeners' questions that we were getting in the last week for you. So, James, why don't you go to Jonathan Haskin's question first?
So Admiral Joe, Jonathan Haskin asks that if you are nominated to run against Pat Toomey, it will be the first rematch in the Senate in Pennsylvania history. Do you feel that that's a unique position for you as a candidate to be in?
I love it, because the great thing is George Bush once said about a person walking out of prison, for example, America is the land of second opportunity. I mean, look at Bob Casey, how many times he ran for a second time to win. Look at Ed Rendell, how many times he lost and then kept on going. Look at Abraham Lincoln. I could not even get close to his category. How many times he lost? The key is in America, persistence. You keep on going. So I actually cherish this one, because I liked people beside me in combat that I knew when they got knocked down, they'd pick themselves up and keep on going. Why? For the purpose that I just want to make sure that the youth can afford education and that our families can have wages that once again begin to increase. I love this fight, every moment of it.
All right, so we're coming towards the end of our interview right now, and we want to know, what is your advice to the college students out there, to the students at the University of Pennsylvania? what can they do to serve their country?
I, of course, am for national service. It doesn't have to be the military. It could be AmeriCorps, etc. So whenever youth meets one another, like we do in the military, where you serve, it brings us together. But for each individual, I would say go with your gut. Just don't accept that the way it is the right way. I love youth because they are not burdened with experience. They are out there with fresh, new ideas. My gosh, maybe I should create a Facebook. Or maybe I should do this. I mean, the original Facebook. My thing is that the reason what I love the youth out there that I fought with, I lived with, I went out with just to kind of talk with in the evenings, and I always went out with them on mission, is that they were the ones that were the instigators of new ideas, new thoughts, because they weren't burdened with the old way of doing things. Bring that to whatever you do. Don't accept that the establishment's got it right. Because, frankly, America wouldn't be in the position it is today if the establishment had it right. And so take advantage of who you are, but never forget that we're all in this together.
Well, Admiral, thank you so much for joining us. One thing that we wanted to let you know about before you head off again back onto the campaign trail is that Philadelphia is always welcome to you, and specifically our university. So we wanted to invite you to come visit us at the Government and Politics Association here at the University of Pennsylvania. I don't know if you've ever, I believe you actually have visited our campus while I've been here in my 4 years. But it would be good to see you again and have you out here. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, we hope that you'll stop by.
I would love to. 5 of my 6 sisters went to the University of Pennsylvania. I visited all the time. Yep. And, to me, I watched it grow from the 70s, the 80s, and it's just a marvelous type of thing there in Philly. I got to tell you something. I can still remember going to Franklin Stadium and watching Norm Snead and play football with the Eagles when they used to have the preseason games there. Look, all I can leave you with is this. I love the youth of America. They are our national treasure. And I'll never forget one evening where President Clinton had people in who had landed on the beaches of Normandy. And they had an historian who told the president that night about the youth who had landed on the Normandy beaches and how the officers were killed, but yet the young enlisted picked themselves up, 18, 19, 20 years old. They took the cliffs. And then he said, Mr. President, they went all the way over the following years to Berlin. And then he turned back to the president, pointed at him, and said, Mr. President, don't ever forget that whatever that it is, that we instill in the youth of America, that it is the most precious national treasure you must most cherish. The youth, wherever you are in America, is the most precious asset we have. And how trained they are, how educated they are, not what to think, but how to think, I think is our homeland defense. So thank you.
Admiral, thank you so much for all the inspirational words and for taking all of our questions and leaving us with that beautiful thought. So many of us are inspired by your career of service and leadership and sacrifice, really. And it's been really an honor and privilege for both James and I to have you on the program here on The Divided Line. And to just hear from you and hear about some of the things that you want to do for this country and the things that you have already done for this country. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody here at the Divided Line and the Government and Politics Association. We hope that you'll come and visit us, and maybe we can get you at the Palestra for a basketball game, although the team isn't doing so well this year. But
yeah, but you had a great doubleheader weekend here the other day with 4 of the Big 5 teams coming back here in that Palestra. I used to love watching it. But please, I visited with a college group there at University of Penn about just before the holidays, and I'd love to come back before you back and also be on your station again.
It would be our honor again to have you and to have you here in person, maybe even. So we will be in touch. Thank you so much, Admiral. Have a great day, and we will close out the program just after this.